Have you ever found yourself in a situation where your love for a family member pulled you in two completely different directions?
Hello, I'm John from Texas, United States, your friend and narrator of real stories. Stay with me until the end of this incredible story. Want to see your story told here? Then get in touch with us.
Today's story is about that very struggle, the painful conflict between fighting for a life and honoring a wish for peace. The drive home from the geriatrician's office was a vacuum of sound. The three of them sat in the car, each trapped in their own private world. The doctor's words still hanging in the air like a fine, suffocating dust. The heart failure is progressing to its final stage. At this point, our focus shifts from treatment to comfort. For Thomas, the 80-year-old patriarch in the passenger seat, the news had landed with a strange and quiet peace. He had lived a full life, a life rich with the love of his late wife, a life sustained by a simple but profound faith. He was tired. He was ready. For his daughter, Lucy, sitting in the back, the words were a confirmation of a grief she had been carrying for months. Her heart, gauged with a deep, sorrowful acceptance. Her main concern now was honoring her father's wishes for his final days. But for her older brother Daniel, driving the car with a white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel, the doctor's words were not an ending. They were a declaration of war, a war he refused to lose. As soon as they were back in the familiar quiet of their father's home, the fragile truce shattered. Thomas, with a calm that unnerved his son, gathered them in the living room. "Children," he began, his voice weak but steady, "we need to talk about what comes next, and I need you to listen, really listen." He spoke of his love story with their mother, a partnership of 55 years that he felt was not truly over, but merely paused. "I miss her every single day," he said, a gentle smile touching his lips. "And I am not afraid to see her again. My faith in God has prepared me for this journey. I am at peace." He looked at them, his gaze direct and full of love. "I want to spend the time I have left here, in this house. I don't want any more hospitals, any more aggressive treatments. I want palliative senior care. I want to die in my own bed, surrounded by the memories we made as a family." Lucy knelt by his chair and took his hand, her tears falling freely. "We understand, Dad," she whispered. "We will honor that." But Daniel began to pace the room, his face a mask of agitated disbelief. "Honor that? Honor what? Giving up?" "Dad, I don't understand you. We have to fight this. There are other doctors, other treatments." "Daniel, please," Thomas said, his voice patient. "This isn't giving up. This is acceptance. It is the final act of a long and blessed life. It is my decision." "It's the wrong decision." Daniel's voice rose, cracking with a desperate energy. "What about us? You're just going to leave us? We can't just stand by and do nothing. That's not love. That's surrender." This is such a difficult and common conflict. Both children love their father, but they see that love differently. Who do you find yourself agreeing with more in this moment? Daniel, who wants to fight for every last day, or Lucy, who wants to honor her father's wish for peace? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. The days that followed were filled with a tense, loving friction. Lucy dedicated herself to her father's comfort, arranging for a home health aide. She would spend hours just sitting with him, reading from his Bible, talking about old memories, honoring his wish for a peaceful end. Daniel, meanwhile, launched his own campaign. He spent his nights on the internet, researching experimental treatments. He would arrive at the house armed with articles, his voice urgent as he tried to convince his father to see a new specialist. "Dad, I found a cardiologist in the next state," he'd say, his enthusiasm blind to the weary look in his father's eyes. Each of Daniel's suggestions felt like a dash, Small betrayal to Thomas, a dismissal of his most sacred wish. He didn't want his final months to be a series of exhausting trips to sterile clinics. He had lived his life. He had loved his wife. He had made his peace with God. He just wanted to go home, in every sense of the word. The tension between the siblings grew thick and painful. "You're not respecting him, Daniel," Lucy would argue in hushed, angry tones. "You're respecting your own fear of losing him. You're making his last days about your battle, not his peace. And you're just rolling over and letting him die," Daniel would shoot back, his own pain making him cruel. "I refuse to be a son who does nothing while his father fades away." They were both acting out of love, but their expressions of that love were tearing their family apart. Thomas, caught in the crossfire of his children's grief, began to withdraw. The peace he had felt was being eroded by the constant conflict. The crisis came to a head the following week. Daniel arrived at the house, his face flushed with a triumphant excitement. He had pulled strings and secured a consultation with a renowned, aggressive specialist at a major university hospital 3 hours away. "It's all set, Dad," he announced, waving a confirmation email like a trophy. "The appointment is next Thursday. I'll drive you myself. This doctor is the best. If anyone can find a way, it's him." He didn't ask, he announced. He saw his action as a grand gesture of love, but Thomas and Lucy saw it as the ultimate act of disrespect. Thomas looked at his son, his heart breaking. The final piece he had so carefully constructed, the one thing he had asked for, was being stolen from him by the very person he loved so deeply. "Daniel," Thomas said, his voice barely a whisper, "I will not go." A look of utter disbelief crossed Daniel's face. He turned to his sister for support, but Lucy stood firmly beside their father's chair, her arm resting on his shoulder. A silent, unshakable ally. The battle line had been drawn. Daniel stared at his father, his face a mixture of disbelief and wounded pride. "You won't even try?" he asked, his voice strained. "After everything I did to get this appointment? This is the best specialist in the country for your condition." Thomas looked at his son with eyes full of a sorrowful love. "Your heart is in the right place, son. But my heart," he said, placing a frail hand over his chest, "is tired. It has done its work. It is time for it to rest." The argument that followed was the most painful of their lives. Daniel, feeling his desperate attempts to save his father being rejected, turned his frustration on Lucy. He accused her of being weak, of passively accepting death, of not loving their father enough to fight for him. Lucy, in turn, defended her father's dignity, her voice sharp with the pain of her brother's accusations. Thomas sat in his chair, listening to the two people he loved most in the world tear each other apart over his dying body. The peace he had so desperately craved was being shattered by the very love that was supposed to be his final comfort. That night, sleep was an impossibility for everyone. Thomas lay in his bed, the angry words of his children echoing in the dark. He knew he was failing them. He had failed to teach them how to let go. His faith had brought him peace. But he had not managed to share that peace with his own son. He realized that a simple declaration of his wishes was not enough. He had to show Daniel the why behind his decision. That act of trying to explain one's soul, perhaps in a final letter, is so powerful. If you had to write a letter to explain the core truth of your life to your children, what is the most important thing you would want them to know? Share your thoughts in the comments. With a surge of purpose, Thomas slowly got out of bed, his movements careful. He went to his old wooden desk and took out a pen and his finest stationery. He was going to write a letter, perhaps the most important one of his life. He began not by talking about his health, but about his love story with their mother. He wrote about the day he met her, the instant connection. He wrote about their wedding day, the promises they had made before God. He filled the page with memories that had built the foundation of their family. Then he wrote about his faith. "Daniel," he wrote, his hand a little shaky, "you see my desire for peace as giving up. I need you to see it through my eyes. For 55 years, your mother and I built a life based on our faith in God. We believed that this life was a beautiful, precious gift, but that it was a journey, not a final destination. We read in the Bible that there is a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die. My son, my time is coming, and I am not afraid." He tried to explain the peace he felt. "This is not despair. It is the opposite. It is the culmination of my faith. I feel a profound sense of gratitude for the life I have been given. I got to love your mother. I got to watch you and Lucy grow into wonderful adults. My heart is full. To spend my final days fighting for a few more painful weeks, attached to machines in a cold hospital room, would be a betrayal of the beautiful, full life God has already given me. It would be an act of fear, not of faith. I do not want the end of my story to be a desperate struggle against death. I want it to be a peaceful, grateful walk towards the arms of the God who has sustained me, and towards the woman I have longed to see again." He sealed the letter in an envelope, his heart both heavy and light. The next day, he asked Lucy to go out for a while, to give him and Daniel some time alone. When his son entered the living room, his face still— "Son," he said, "but I wrote this for you. Please read it." Daniel took the letter, his expression a mixture of confusion and reluctance. He sat down and began to read. As he read, his entire demeanor began to change. The rigid set of his jaw softened. The anger in his eyes dissolved, replaced by a deep, heartbreaking sadness. He was reading the unedited manuscript of his father's soul. He was seeing the depth of his parents' love story, the bedrock of his father's faith. The letter was not an argument. It was a testament. Have you ever had a conversation or read something that completely changed your perspective on a loved one's decision? Tell us about that powerful moment. When Daniel finished reading, he couldn't speak. He just sat there, the letter trembling in his hands, tears streaming down his face. He was not just weeping for the impending loss of his father. He was weeping for his own blindness, for the way his own fear had made him deaf to his father's deepest need. He finally looked up at his father, his eyes full of a new, raw understanding. "I didn't see," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I was so scared of losing you. I wasn't thinking about you at all. I was thinking about me." "I know," Thomas said softly, reaching out his hand. "That is what love does, my son. It makes us afraid. But true love, the kind of love Jesus teaches, also gives us the strength to let go." Daniel went to his father. Kneeling before him, just as Lucy had done, he put his head on his father's knees, and for the first time since he was a small boy, he allowed his father to comfort him. Thomas stroked his son's hair, his heart overflowing with a love so pure it felt like a prayer. The war was over. Later that afternoon, Daniel made the phone call. With his father and sister sitting quietly in the room with him, he canceled the appointment with the specialist. "My father has made a different decision," he said into the phone, his voice clear and steady. "And we as a family are going to honor it." When he hung up, a new kind of silence filled the room. It was not the silence of tension or unspoken arguments. It was the silence of peace. The family was whole again, united in the shared, sacred purpose of walking their father through the final chapter of his life, with as much love, dignity, and grace as they could muster. The battle for his health was over, and the ministry of his peaceful death could now begin. The weeks that followed were a sacred, precious gift. The war was over, and the house settled into a new rhythm, a rhythm of peace. Daniel and Lucy became a seamless team, their old conflicts replaced by a shared, quiet purpose. Their mission was no longer to fight their father's health condition, but to honor his humanity. The family's focus shifting from fighting the illness to honoring the person is such a crucial change. Have you ever been part of an end-of-life journey where comfort and peace became the main priority? What did that experience teach you? The focus of his senior care shifted entirely from prolonging his life to enriching it. Daniel, the man of action, now channeled his energy into his father's comfort. He sourced a more comfortable bed. He created a playlist of his father's favorite classical music, and he learned from the hospice nurse how to manage his father's symptoms with a gentle, confident touch. Lucy, the heart of the family, filled the house with love. She read to him for hours, not just from his Bible, but from the poetry books he and her mother had loved. They looked through old photograph albums, their laughter soft and gentle, replacing the tense arguments of the past. They were no longer just a patient and his caregivers. They were a father and his children, making one last set of memories. In his final days, free from the stress of conflict, Thomas was able to give his children his final, most important gift, his wisdom. He shared stories of his life they had never heard, filling in the missing chapters of their own history. He spoke of his love story with their mother, of the challenges they had faced and the faith that had seen them through. He talked openly about his own death, not with fear, but with a peaceful sense of anticipation. "Don't be sad for me," he told them one afternoon, as they sat with him in the sun-drenched living room. "I have lived a truly epic book of a life. I have loved and been loved. I have seen my children grow into remarkable people. My faith has shown me that this is not an end, but a homecoming. I am going to see your mother. I am going to see my Lord, Jesus. How can I be anything but grateful?" A peaceful death is something many people pray for. What does a good death mean to you? Is it about being free from pain, being surrounded by family, or something else entirely? Share your personal thoughts in the comments. His peace was a tangible thing, a calming presence in the house. He taught them that a good death was not something to be feared, but a final, crowning achievement of a life well lived. He showed them that true strength was not in fighting against the inevitable, but in surrendering to God's will with grace and trust. When the end came, it was exactly as Thomas had prayed for. It was a quiet Tuesday morning. He was in his own bed, the window open to the sounds of the birds in his garden. Daniel was on one side of the bed, Lucy on the other. They were each holding one of his hands. He opened his eyes, looked at each of his children, and gave them a faint, loving smile. Then he closed his eyes, and with one final, peaceful breath, he was gone. The grief in the room was immense, but it was a clean grief, unburdened by the poison of regret or unfinished arguments. They had honored him. They had loved him well in his final days. After the funeral, Daniel and Lucy sat together at their father's desk. Daniel took out the letter his father had written him, its pages already worn from being read so many times. He read it aloud to Lucy, his voice thick with emotion. They cried together, not just for their loss, but in gratitude for the final lesson their father had taught them. He had not just shown them how to die with dignity. He had shown them how to live with love, how to heal a family, and how to face the hardest moments of life with a faith that does not waver. His greatest legacy was not the business he had built or the house he had left them. His greatest legacy was the peace he had fought to give them in his final days. The story of Thomas and his family is a powerful lesson in love, respect, and the difficult grace of letting go. It teaches us that sometimes the most loving act is not to fight for more time, but to honor the time that is left. It shows that even in the face of death, there is an opportunity for profound healing, for families to come together, and for a faith in God to provide a peace that passes all understanding. It is a reminder that every person deserves the right to write the final chapter of their own story with dignity. If this story of a family's difficult but beautiful journey has touched your heart, please honor it with a like, so that it may bring comfort to others facing a similar path. And please subscribe to Stories Beyond 50 for more stories that navigate the deep and meaningful questions of life. Now, we open this sacred space to you. Has your family ever had to face a difficult end-of-life decision? How do you balance the desire to fight for a loved one with the need to respect their wishes? What has your own faith taught you about life, death, and the art of letting go? Your stories and your wisdom are a profound gift to this community. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments below. And if you are not ready to share, but you believe in the power of a peaceful and dignified end to a life well lived, just write the single word peace in the comments. Let us honor together the final wishes of our loved ones. We read and cherish every word you share. Thank you for your heart and your courage. God bless you, and we will see you in the next story.